very much for this very interesting paper and for this important initiative. Now, the last presentation of our colleague from Norway, Hanne, Martine, Eckhoff, please. A member of our team and our supervisor.
So, yes, my name is Hanne Eckhoff, and I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be on the Suprasълski project. What I'm going to do here today is to talk a bit about the project which I'm mainly associated with, the Proekt project, and also on how we think we can contribute with the work we've done so far to the Suprasълski. Title is Syntactic Annotation of the Old Church Salon Canon. So first a couple of words about the Proekt project. As Professor pointed out, Proekt stands for Pragmatic Resources in all the European languages. I hadn't thought about the possible Russian interpretation of that, but thank you for that, I will bring it on. By pragmatic resources, we need to concentrate on phenomena such as word order, anaphoric expressions, definiteness, participles as used to encode background events, and discourse particles. So basically our project is a fiercely linguistic project, and this is probably as opposed to most of the talks we've heard during this a very interesting conference. So basically this is the linguist's perspective on how we should do medieval Slavic text. So the cornerstone, or the centerpiece of the Proekt project is a text corpus which is made for linguists, which has as its focus to make the most of a limited data set, which is what you will always have when you're a historical linguist, to cram it with information so that it can better be used for linguistic research. So the core of our project is the earliest naturally occurring parallel corpus of old European languages, which is the New Testament. So what we have in our corpus is the New Testament in its Greek original and its earliest Latin, Gothic, Classical, Armenian, and Old Church Slavonic translations. So for Old Church Slavonic we have Marianus. And this is a better idea for Armenian, Old Church Slavonic, Gothic than it actually is for Greek and Latin, because the New Testament translations are the oldest attestations of Armenian and Old Church Slavonic, and virtually the only attestation of Gothic. And I mean, it's fair to say that the Gospels constitute the core of the Old Church Slavonic text canons. That's what we started with. We have a little bit more Old Church Slavonic text in the Proekt corpus too. So I should first say that we have the Codex Marianus complete with full morphosyntactic annotation, so 58,173 words annotated and checked with full morphological and syntactic annotation. So that's publicly available to all. And in progress, we are doing annotation of parts of the Stogratensis to cover some of the lacunae in Marianus, and we've done a little bit of that, beginning of the bits of the beginning of Matthew, which are actually extant in the Soprathensis, so that's only 878 words. And also in progress is annotation of Supprasълският in cooperation with the Supprasълският project, which is now up to 2008 treatments annotated, which is not a lot, constitutes a year and a half, basically. Yeah. So let me tell you a bit about our corpus annotation. So the idea is to do many-layered manual and semi-manual annotation of all the texts. So basically we do morphological annotation, We do syntactic annotation in the shape of dependency grammar. We do various semantic and other customized annotation. For instance, we did anonymity annotation for all Old Slavonic nominals and all Greek nouns. We do annotation of information structure due to the core interest of our project. And what we also had done with the New Testament is automatic alignment at word level, at token level, with the Greek original text, if there is a original text. So I will talk you through all of these things quite briefly. And I will do live demonstration, as Stefan's presentation demonstrated the troubles of live demonstrations, so this will be by screenshots. But if anyone wants a live demonstration, please ask me and I will show you more than you want to see, I think. Okay, so a brief note on texts. As Kevin noticed, we take the texts that we can get, basically. So the goal of our project is to amass linguistic knowledge, and we don't aim at representing manuscripts as such, but of course we think that philological details are important, that they should be correct. So we have been basing ourselves on editions and available electronic texts. And for the Marianus, this means that as everyone else, we use the Helsinki corpus and we harmonized it and checked it against the printed edition. A little on text format as well. So we do a 3-layer coding of the text to handle conflicts between linguistic units and faithfulness to the manuscript. We have a representation of each source division, which basically means chapter or single beta, which has a tail-light encoding of the edition that we use. Then we have a sentence representation, which contains the relevant part of the source division text, but may or may not have further information. So we may do expansion of abbreviation, but we only do that if that's important for syntax. And it gives more structured markup, which reflects the tokenization, which means basically that we have word elements in the sentence presentation. And each token has a single form, which may or may not be normalized, but we normalize very little. We keep tokenization and sentence text in sec, and I will leave the source division text to reflect the original edition. So that's what we do to preserve both linguistic and manuscript structure, basically. And the tokens are primarily stored in a relational database, but they can be exported to various XML formats. What we have to do when we import text is to do sentence division, because there is no sentence division in Slavic medieval manuscript. Punctuation is a very unreliable guide to what constitutes a sentence in any reasonable sense. And also sentence division is sort of arbitrary because it's difficult to distinguish true coordinations from sentences which just have an introductory conjunction. So, what we do at import, basically, the simple solution is just to split at every punctuation sign, and then we have had a couple of approaches to what we do in practice. So with the Marianus, we actually took these chunks and grouped them by using an algorithm which tried to make the best possible match with the length of corresponding Greek sentences, which worked fairly well. Not perfect, but it was pretty good, and we had to do some manual correction. For instance, the Suprasълският, we have just imported chunks based on punctuation, and then we do it manually. So, for instance, this is this is imported divisions for the Suprasълският. So if you look at this, this is basically, from a linguistic point of view, this is two sentences. So, и потом пригвождается на древе крестне, and so on, which will go on at least until по прерождению дьяволу, I would say. So, yeah, okay, you can make 3 sentences out of this. So basically, punctuation units don't correspond to sentences. So that has to be done in some other way. So in the Suprasълският, we've just been doing it manually. Okay, so over to the actual annotation. So what we do have is a web-based annotation interface, which made it possible for us to work with an international team of annotators, including Citama Dimitrova. Yeah, there you are. You know all about this. And so people in Poland and Russia and Norway and wherever, Germany. So what the annotator had to do? Well, first he or she had to do manual adjustment of sentence boundaries, as I just pointed out to you. Then manual disambiguation of morphology and lemmatization in one step. Then syntactic annotation. And then finally, every sentence was checked by project members. And for Slavic, that is me. So if there are errors, they are mine. And as I said, the Codex Marianus is now fully annotated and fully reviewed and publicly available. So that's what it's like. So basically for the morphology, we started out with a really slim rule file. Can you see that? That's maybe a bit small. So in the beginning, as Sutana knows, we had very, very few guesses. I mean, the system didn't know anything. But as we go, as we annotate more and more, it amasses every form it's ever seen and provides guesses. So basically now that we have done 1.5 vita of the Supprassalski's, we get guesses for about half the words in every sentence. And this is, by the way, the cost of including the breathings and, and so on, because that makes, this is the reason why it doesn't recognize the form as Isida, for instance, which it has of course seen before, because there are like 40 occurrences of Isida in the Gospels. But due to the breeding, it hasn't seen that particular form of Isida before, and then you have to enter morphology yourself, and it will know the lemma, so you have to type like the first 2-3 characters of the lemma, and then you can pick it from a drop-down list. So basically, but as you go, this gets better and better, and sort of towards the end of the gospel annotations, I think there would rarely be more than 1 or 2 words that you actually had to manually contemplate. So when you finish this, you get a full annotation like this, which gives you morphological information and lemmatization for every word. Yeah. Actually, it did know Alvilia. It just didn't come up because there were 2 guesses that tied, so it didn't know which one to put up, but there was a guess. There was actually only 3 words that had to be done totally manually in this sentence. Yeah. And you can click every lemma here and you will get every occurrence of that lemma. Okay, so a little bit about the syntactic annotation scheme. We use a variety of dependency grammar because that has a very great advantage that you can store information about syntactic relations and word order separately, which is great for weird word order languages such as early Slavic or modern Slavic for that matter, ancient Greek. And it's also very computationally attractive because it relies mainly on overt elements. It also has some problems, and we did some adjustments compared to, for instance, the Prague dependency tree bank scheme. So we enriched it with some adjustments inspired by lexical functional grammar. So basically that means that we use some empty nodes. We can use empty verbs, for instance, when a verb is omitted in a sentence. We have some secondary dependencies, which means that we will point out the subject of the control infinitive, for instance. We do more granular syntactic relations, which can be an advantage if you are interested in syntax. Yeah. And when we do syntax, we do manual annotation, but it's guided by morphology-based guesses. And what we end up with is a dependency tree like this. And if you look at it, the labels are fairly familiar, so dependency grammar has the advantage that it's fairly close to, if I might call it, school grammar. It's recognizable to most linguists, and it is translatable into most syntactic approaches. So, I mean, a subject is a subject, an adverbial is an adverbial, a predicate is a predicate. It's not particularly strange to anyone. Okay. We also have done quite a lot of other annotation for instance, for information structure, which is annotation for whether the information is previously mentioned, or totally new, or accessible from context or from inference, for instance. We also did annotate for case. We have what we call semantic tags, which are really user-defined tags at token or lemma level. And we've mostly used them for semantic annotation, so for animacy, for prepositional semantics, but we've also used them, for instance, for prefixation, suffixation. So we have full annotation for verbal prefixes and Slavic differences, and suffixes and steps. Yeah, and we also have sentence-level tags, which we use to encode direct speech, for instance, which can be useful for some purposes. So basically, this gives a possibility for individual scholars to contribute to the corpus and to avoid duplication of effort. For instance, our positional semantics annotation was contributed by our visiting scholar, Olga Thomason, who actually annotated every single Greek prepositional phrase for prepositional semantics, which was crazy, but great for the purpose, I would say. Yeah. And as for exploiting translations, it's Marianus, and most of the Czechoslovak is translated from Greek, which gives opportunities and it gives challenges. So if the two languages diverge, we believe that static translation correspondence can shed light on both languages. And in case of full overlap, well, there is reason to suspect that there may be Greek influence. So by adding alignments to the database, it's possible to do quantitative linguistic studies, but should also be of interest to specialists in other fields than linguistics. So for instance, for translation studies, this is good, and we have been doing some experimental sort of authorship tests by statistical methods, which is fun. Yeah, so there's a great spread between the Latin translators, for instance. We did the alignment between Greek and Old Slavonic by developing an algorithm that automatically aligns each language with the Greek original at token level. So we haven't actually sat there manually and done every word one by one. And that means that each token in the Marianus actually has a pointer to the corresponding Greek word, unless, of course, the alignment was unsuccessful. I'll just say something briefly about how we did this. So, I mean, the Bible is, well, the New Testament is great for this because every verse is sort of aligned. There is verse numbering, the divisions are the same for every translation. And the texts are really very, very close. So, basically, what this ends up with is that this limits very seriously what words can be the translation, which words. So in principle, in these two sentences in Mark 38 and 638, every Slavic word could be a translation of any Greek word. So on could be a translation of Possus, or Koligo could be a translation of Hypageta. The computer doesn't know in the outset. I mean, now it just knows that this is the Slavic verse and this is the Greek verse. But by doing statistic analysis, by doing likelihood measures, we can check this. Because if we make a table, such as this one, for every co-occurring Greek and Slavic lemma, we can do likelihood tests, for instance. So if we look at every verse that has Slavic riba, we find that in those corresponding verses, there will be 6 cases of Greek ichthys, 17 cases of Greek ichthys. And in sentences, in Slavic verses that don't have riba, there will be only 6 ichthys, but there will be actually 3,529 other things than ichthys, whereas in the non-riba, yeah. So basically, if we do a Fisher exact test on this, you get this enormous p-value, enormously low p-value. So it's not likely that this happens by chance. That's sort of the idea here. It's extremely unlikely that ichthus and riba are in the same verse by chance. So if you do this with extremely frequent works, if we do riba and ace, for instance, so into in Greek, which occurs all over the place, you also get the low p-value, but it's not as low in the 0.05. Yeah. Okay. So basically, you can do likelihood measures, and you can make a pretty good dictionary. That's generally the idea. So that's what we do. We create a dictionary for each lemma. We rank the potential originals in the source language, and the dictionary is pretty good. So for riba, you will get like ichthys, oxarion, and then you're going to get things like bread and net and stuff like that, which is sort of also quite likely to occur in the same verse as fish, but they're not as highly ranked. And then, when we check possible translation pairs, we score them by using the dictionary, and we also use the linearization numbers and morphological and syntactic information. And we repeat this several times, and generally we end up with pretty good results, well over 90% success, which is good. So we don't do any manual work, and the computer does everything, which is great. And this is the method that may be used on any parallel text, as long as there are comparable text units, such as verse, or sentence, or lines. But it also there also has to be an actual source text, which is problematic with the Suprasълският, as we've heard. But this is an available method, which can be tested on basically any text pair, which is reasonably close and has text units. Yeah. So what do we want with this kind of data? And the typical thing that we would want to do is, for instance, to check the use of ultra-Slavonic genitive accusative and its correlation with Greek definiteness. And actually what we find is that there is a huge correlation. You are much more likely to have a definite article in the Greek if the Slavic has the genitive accusative, but it doesn't work the other way around. So if you have the nominative accusative in ultra-Slavonic, it's sort of 50-50 whether there will be an article in the Greek. So much more can be done with this, but this is the kind of data you can pull from this kind of database. Okay, so I'll say something briefly about data export. So we export data which is freely available for anyone who registers in several XML formats. As for the Suprasълският project, we can make an export XML with PREOTKRIVANE annotation, and this export XML can be woven with the detailed textological information which is necessary for electronic edition. So you would want to weave information from the PREOTKRIVANE project with information which is much more manuscript oriented. And I think this is a great idea. I think textologists and linguists and computer scientists should really unite, and such projects are great ideas. And actually I'm involved in a similar project which does which does linguistic annotation in the PREOTKRIVANE software, but does detailed manuscript oriented XML, which will be great. And one of the advantages, I think, of a scheme like the one David suggested is also that querying the corpus might be a bit more accessible than currently is with the PREOTKRIVANE data. But the PREOTKRIVANE application is really primarily an annotation tool, but it has a pretty good browsing facility, and it supports simple queries. So you can do token queries with wildcards. You can query for particular word forms. You can do lemma queries also with wildcards, so you can look up particular lemmas. But you can't do any morphological or syntactic queries. What you can do is to export the data in Tiger XML format and query it in the Tiger search interface, which is a pretty good interface as far as it goes, but it has a lot of problems. For instance, that it's no longer maintained and it hasn't gotten supportable, and it works best on Linux, which is kind of an obvious problem, and it's not going to be integrated with the corpus database, so this means that the user would have to install search software and download data and so on. We do have another test solution, which is an online query interface based on the Hanne project in Berlin, so if anyone is interested in that, they should ask me about it. I will show you. That was basically very briefly what I had to say about queries, but I think that the kind of work David wants to do would be an opportunity for a more humane query interface too, which would be probably a good idea. Okay, so to sum up, the goal of the PREOTKRIVANE corpus as it is now is to make a corpus that fits PREOTKRIVANE's needs, but that should also be reusable to scholars in a much wider field. So we really, really want people to use our stuff and our data, and also our interfaces if they want to. There is possibility for customized tagging by individual specialists. There is automatic alignment with Greek as long as you actually annotate the Greek and the Greek is reliable. The query possibilities are improving. And we do have a pretty efficient tool for online annotation, which doesn't require any software or font installation, which is already set up for OCS and which has a lot of stored morphological information included, which makes a morphological annotation, lemmatization, syntactic annotation quite much quicker than it would otherwise be. So the obvious idea would be to just expand the corpus with more texts from the Old Church Slavonic canon, and I hope that this will happen. Yeah, and also annotated data may be exported in XML format and further enriched. Yeah, so there was my final slide, which is about availability, which basically says that you can all try this at home, you can all register at the PREOTKRIVANE corpus and take a look. Thank you.